All right, welcome again to reputation-based weighted voting, the A to Z case study at Token Engineering Academy at the study season 2024. This is the 5th session in a row. We are meeting every week to come up with a voting design fit for purpose to select the first fellowship prize winner at TE Academy. And since we are all token engineers, yes, we designed the voting algorithm together. We started some weeks ago. You can follow our work via the study season registration. If you're following us on YouTube or Twitter, you can still register tokenengineering.net to get full access to the course material, to the recordings, to the GitHub repository, and any write-ups and documentation. Okay, let's see. First, hello everyone, welcome back to the session. We had a great week, I would say, with working on a generalized model and working on refining the requirements. We'll see a presentation as well today. Let's take a look at our agenda. Okay, first, I'd like to give you some updates on timelines just as a refresher. Then, Felix is going to present. We'll recap the verification goals. This verification stage is super important. We want to make sure that we've selected the best possible algorithm and voting design for the fellowship prize winner voting. Then Andrew, Octopus, will give us a walkthrough and show the GitHub generalized model he has created. And then let's run simulations together to gain or to train our token engineering muscles, our modeling and simulation muscles, and have all results we need and all verification steps we'd like to complete before we take the final decision. And this will be announced in the next steps. All right. Timelines and updates. Our next meeting, June 5th, will be super important because actually then we'll select the voting design for the fellowship prize. And I mean, at the moment we have several options on the table, several designs on the table. There are several verification steps open, I'd say, and this is the topic of today. And on June 5th, we'll review these verification results. We'll also review implementation constraints that we have to consider, of course, since we want to go live with the voting interface and conduct the voting end of June. And of course, also the simplicity for voters should be an argument or a requirement for us to take a decision. And based on these three aspects, verification results, implementation constraints, and simplicity for voters, we take a decision in the session on June 5th. So make sure to take part. And then we'll also share more submission details for the students, for you, to receive the NFT as a proof of knowledge in this live track 4. And finally, we should also discuss and decide until next week if the track 4 students should participate in the voting and if this NFT should count in the voting. And there are pros and cons, happy to share them and happy to discuss. Okay, but for now, I think we should be ready for Felix's presentation. At least we are ready, but I can't see Felix in the meeting. Let's check. Let me go to our Discord and see. Has any one of you been in touch with Felix? So is he still getting his presentation finished? Let me check if I got any notes from Felix. Otherwise, I don't know, maybe we can continue with other agenda items. Let me just send a final message. Oops. Felix, where are you? Ready for the presentation? Okay. Good. I've dropped him a note, and I think we can continue with the recap of what do we actually find out in the verification, right? Yeah? Okay. Good. So over the past week, Octopus and I have been in touch and reviewing, okay, where are we? What have we achieved so far? And what do we want to achieve until next week? And what I think there are two key elements. Number one, let's have a simple, flexible model to run simulations, to have a good infrastructure and tooling for our further verification steps. And Andrew, Octopus will share a model later. And number two, let's be clear about what we'd like to find out in the verification. And actually, we are in a typical stage that token engineers experience frequently. At some point, you have invested a lot of time in requirements, in building the model, and then you have to take a step back and see, okay, wait, what are the actual questions we'd like to simulate? What are the experiments, the scenarios we can verify with? And how should we set up the simulation? And this is actually a very important step to not get lost in data and in information for token engineers. And that's why we'd like to do it again with you today. And everyone in the call, feel free to switch on your mics if you have any questions, or drop a note to the chat as usual. Okay, let's verify our voting design. With the voting designs, the ideas we have on the table, how can we make sure we pick the best design for our purpose? First reference, of course, is our requirement stock still. You can find it in our Discord channel in the pinned messages. Happy to drop it to the chat in a moment as well. So the final list of, I think it was 25 requirements and comments on the requirements in this document. So this is number one reference. Then additionally, we have, dig through the data and the goals we nailed in the requirements. And I'd like to highlight 3 simulation goals as a proposal and inspiration to you. Number one is the robustness. So how can we make our mechanism hard to game? Number two is make knowledge, experience, and contribution to the field count, to the field of token engineering, the original motivation to design reputation-based weighted voting. And a third one that came up in the discussion over the past 2 weeks that I also want to make a comment on. This would be balance participation by a voting design, question mark. Okay, number one, robustness. Let's recap some more context. The voting design should be hard to game by malicious actors. So we want to have a design that makes it hard to be taken over by those who have not legitimately acquired an NFT, for example, or those who, just want to outvote other voters. The measures we have already taken, there are several, are acquiring T Academy NFTs requires work, and sometimes depends on the NFT, month of studying time, or to be selected as a speaker at our events. So it's hard to just set up a wallet and then collect NFTs randomly and take part in the voting. And the weights we have assigned so far, so there is the CSV file with the first proposal of weights. I can show it later if you like. The different weights I'm proposing there reflect this. So NFTs who are particularly hard to acquire might have some more voting weight in order to make our voting algorithm more robust. Okay, measure number one. The second measure is TE Academy NFTs are non-transferable, so they can't be traded or borrowed or lended away or can't be used by various IDs. So it's not possible to simply take part in a voting, then send my NFTs to somebody else. This person takes part in the voting, and so on and so forth. This is technically not doable because the NFTs are not transferable. Okay, more context. Additional measures we can take in the voting design. Yes, assign a weight to the NFTs and make them count according to knowledge experience they prove. Then find best weights for robustness, and this would be part of the verification. And one more measure we can take is take a snapshot of all eligible wallets, meaning we can say, okay, there's a deadline for all NFTs that should count in the voting. And we make this deadline early enough to reduce the likeliness that malicious actors acquire NFTs afterwards, just for the voting. Makes sense? And we can keep this deadline, this snapshot confidential, of course. We can also be transparent about it. This is all part of our conversation in the voting design. And my question for verifying robustness would be, or let's say my starting point that I would propose, is how many voters of certain stakeholder NFTs to consider are needed to outvote all others. And for robustness, and for this particular case, we should consider dedicated NFTs that are easiest to game. And from all the NFTs we have minted, or we will be offering in the next weeks until the voting, this list of NFTs are those who are easiest to acquire. So we should keep a close eye on that these NFTs cannot be used to easily outvote other NFTs. Okay, so I stop here for a moment and let's check if everybody has a clear picture of this aspect of robustness in the verification. Any questions? Welcome.
I have a question. So I think the goal, from our conversations, I understand that the goal here is, to make sure that basically you're not vulnerable to a large social attack where people are spamming study season registrations just to vote. I'm wondering about the difference between things that are digital only versus physical only, and think about weighting those.
But can you give me an example of physical only?
So if someone comes to ECC have to take their body there.
Yeah.
Whereas I could, in theory, 1,000 study season registrations from my house before next Monday. So it's really difficult, I guess, or is there still a ranking on some of them?
You're right. That's a good comment. We could say that we not only take a look at all these 5, we again rank them. And for example, this one, study season registration only, is probably put on top, because this is the easiest to acquire. You just have to submit a registration at the study season and will receive this NFT. So I would say this one is particularly relevant. And here, agree, someone would have visited the EFCC 2023 to receive this NFT. So yes, we can further rank these NFTs, or I don't know, give them a certain value or indication to inform vulnerability. Okay.
There's a question in the chat. Could you explain what the Barcamp is?
Yeah, great question. The Barcamp was an event 2023 live event in Paris last year at ECC, where we met in the community. It was a physical event, so people had to be there and either give a talk. This would be the NFT for Barcamp speakers, who is not listed in this list, or the Barcamp attendee. So we didn't verify, this is also important to know, at EFCC attendee or Barcamp attendee, there was no verification on knowledge acquired. So we can't be sure that these people really gained new insights on the token engineering discipline. And yeah, Barcamp was a live event last year. Saramba, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just realized, I was wondering, I don't know if that probably was discussed at some point, but I'm curious, are there any circumstances where an NFT would be deemed as acquired illegally, unfairly, and is there any process then that would mean either sort of tracking out the NFT, or I mean that's not really possible, but maybe like taking away the rights, and just an example of what potentially might be, I don't know, seen as acquired illegally. So let's say there is a person who, like, this is a physical person, not a bot, but a person who maybe in one of the study groups, when people are taking exams, they're making notes, and they're sharing some of their like answers about the exam, and maybe a person comes and is like, oh, I have actually all of the answers here, and takes the exam without doing any work. So, like, I mean, there's still some work because that person did through the notes with answers, but one might think that this is sort of unfairly, and that's not intended. So that's just one thing that came to my mind, but I imagine there might be other cases where something is deemed sort of unfairly acquired. Is there any way that this would sort of, I don't know, the NFT rights could be taken away in such a case?
Okay, so number one, I mean, for example, online exams like you, the case you just mentioned, this example, we can't fully eliminate any attempts to game the online exam. We have randomized questions. We updated the questions, I think 2 times since we launched, to make it harder to game. This is number one. Number two, we have a process. So in case someone reports malicious behavior, to explore and to be able to also blacklist people. So we wouldn't take away the NFT. This is about your keys, your NFTs. But of course, on the rights level, we can say either this NFT is not eligible, or this wallet is not eligible to take part. This would be a way to exclude malicious actors. However, we haven't got any reports in this case, and we haven't found any, or haven't been able to prove malicious behavior ourselves. And that's why at the moment we don't have blacklisted wallets and blacklisted NFTs.
That's fair. I think I was more thinking about is there a process in place, or at least at some conceptual level,
right?
And if yes, is this something that is somehow, because I would think that that might be covered by the question of robustness.
Yeah, and this adds to the robustness of the total system. Fully agree. It's not only the voting design. Joanne.
I have a question about the two NFTs about ECC and Barcamp. Since these events were in the past, can people still acquire these NFTs? Or, I mean,
No.
is there a real reason to be worried that suddenly a lot of people would get these NFTs?
No. In case of these attendee NFTs, the process is you claim your NFT, then you will be added to a whitelist, and then we confirm the distribution manually. And since we don't confirm anymore for these events, one could not acquire EFCC attendee, Barcamp attendee NFTs now,
So
for the sake of participating in the voting. Sorry.
So basically, at this point, we know how many NFTs of this kind are out there, and so I'm not really sure why they would require any particular attention in this context. But it may just be that I'm not understanding something.
No, I would say from the perspective of, can we prevent that people maliciously acquire these NFTs? I would also say for the attendee NFTs, no problem at all. It's not possible to acquire them anymore. And this is a finite number of NFTs minted, and this number won't grow anymore. From the perspective of weights, it might look different, and it also adds to the voting design and robustness, because of course, if it was super easy without, let's say, hard proofs, without hard proofs to acquire this NFT, it maybe should not have super high voting weight and the power to outvote others who are much more, important in this context. This is all I want to say here.
Got it. So it's really two different things then.
Two different things. Exactly.
There are some that a lot of people have these NFTs, and so they maybe should not have too high a weight, and then there are some that might be easy to achieve on a basis that we wouldn't like people to achieve them on.
For example, and then we should take a close look. And you're pointing to the right aspect. How many people or how many NFTs exist? And is this NFT really, should it be powerful when it comes to proving experience? And then see, can this type of NFT outweigh more important NFTs? Just maybe because of the number, because so many NFTs exist of this type. Make sense? Yeah. Okay, cool. Aaron, would you like to switch on your mic, or? Otherwise, I'll just read out. Yet to receive. Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm in a crowded space, so I hope you can hear me well.
We can hear you well.
What I meant by it is that I actually attended the JCC Paris, and then went through all of the live tracks that day. and it was amazing. It was very fulfilling. But the fact is, to as far as I remember, to get the NFT, you just have to be there at the end of the entire sessions. And then I had, some friends and colleagues just joining me at the end of the day. And then, it did happen that, if they were there, they didn't attend the entire day, and then they happened to got the NFT. So, yeah, so that's what I'm trying to say. Like there's certain things there that, that NFT wasn't, entirely a proof that one actually went through all of the sessions and got the information. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so 2 aspects here, but I would have to check. For the EFCC day, we handed out flyers to make sure as many people as possible were able to acquire this NFT. Some people might still have missed this information and have not minted the NFT. Sometimes, particularly in just one-time events, this can happen, unfortunately, but yeah, can happen. And similarly to the barcamp. So meaning for live attendance, of course, it's hard to verify if everybody had enough information at the right time to acquire it, and if people really paid attention. There was no proof of knowledge, obviously. It was just proof of attendance. And that's also makes this, in my opinion, should not make this NFT as powerful as a TE fundamentals exam where you have to invest weeks of learning time. Yeah, equality of opportunities. I agree, Saremba. Sure. There's always room for improvement. At the same time, I don't see how we can solve it now, retrospectively.
I think this is something that probably is worth to have in mind as hopefully being able to figure out. It doesn't feel like this is something that can be figured out easily, but just being mindful of that for some people going to the FCC was easy and accessible, and for some it was maybe like too expensive in terms of money or time, etc.
And also access virtual sessions versus live sessions. And I must say this maybe
and I suppose sorry.
Maybe this could be a reason to give live events attendee NFTs not a high weight. Another reason to not give it a high weight, because there's this additional element that that some people might have missed the chance to be there. Okay, Victor, or anything else you wanted to add, Saremba? Just let us know.
Oh, just that's probably something to keep in mind for the future. Equally with access in all other terms. So, for example, like there's very, very few, or very few. I don't really know that, but there's definitely a huge underrepresentation of people with disabilities in the Web3. So, for example, the disabilities connected to site means that a lot of content is either just fully inaccessible or just really difficult to access. The events might be inaccessible when people have like physical access needs and so on. So those are just things that I guess I'm quite passionate about, but obviously that's not something for now. Just probably something that is worth to always mention as idea and ideal for the future.
To keep in mind. Right. I would take a final question by Victor, and then let's continue, because otherwise we lose too much time to dig into the simulations, which is the actual super important next step we have to take. And just for your information, we plan an office hour on Friday, to also go over some more clarification questions if needed. And of course, also on Discord. Victor.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, very quickly. Yeah. I feel a bit bad because I think I just jumped Jason, so I'm gonna tie his question into mine. He's asking what if we got for registering to the study season an NFT, and there's actually an interesting question because there would be if yes, then there would be quite an easy way how to get an NFT. And then the other thing that I was asking, and I was just pointing at I think something you said, Angela, because I was under the impression that we agreed on like that we actually require the NFT-based reputation in Web3, this type of NFT. And so since this is not on the list, I was just wondering if this should be somehow considered as a basis level and therefore also in the weighting. And so maybe it's not necessarily in the easy category, depending on what your background is, but that is something I wanted to point out.
You mean that the NFT-based reputation in Web3 should not be on this list, or?
No, I think it might have to be because that's kind of the prerequisite, right? If I remember correctly, is this not like the minimum NFT that you have to be eligible? Maybe I was wrong.
No. This is the minimum required is you have a wallet and minimum one NFT of any kind.
Of any kind. Okay. Sorry, my mistake.
Yeah.
Okay.
NFT-based reputation is on this list because the exam is not super hard to pass. And to register in, yes. I now see this question in the chat. Yeah, we haven't sent out any information about minting or about receiving this NFT for being part of the study season via registration because we haven't minted yet. And we haven't even fully defined the process because we are updating the infrastructure. So you didn't miss anything. And we didn't even want to promote this because we didn't want to make this a thing to game the voting. So this is still to be done. Distributing the NFTs to registrants is still to be done. And then, of course, also assigning a weight to it. And we could, all degrees, very low weight, define a deadline for registrations so that in the context of the fellowship voting, people can't come up with now just add 100 registrations. And finally, we can even say this NFT doesn't count at all in the voting. It's also an option. Okay, now I would continue to not steal too much time from Octopus to introduce the voting, the model for simulation. Okay, the second aspect, so we covered robustness. The second aspect is make NFTs count. And we touched on it already. The voting question we have in mind is which fellowship candidate produced most relevant and valuable work for further developing the field of token engineering. And to answer this question, since it asks about the field token engineering and what is relevant and valuable here, you need to have a good understanding of the field token engineering. And the NFTs are one way to reflect the holder's experience and expertise in token engineering. This is why we assign weights to it. Any voter is invited to vote on a prize winner. Yes, so it's not that we want to straightforward exclude students. However, more NFTs should increase voting weight and relevant NFTs should increase voting weight. And again, we could ask the same question for a verification. How many voters of a certain stakeholder NFT group are needed to outvote all others, but for making the NFTs count for this aspect, we would take a look at different groups or different NFTs. For example, the TE Fundamentals 1 modules 1 to 5. Some students or some community members have all 5. So they definitely invested most in studying TE Fundamentals. Or TE Fundamentals Module 3 to 4, both NFTs. These are the hardest or require yes, substantial learning and most relevant skills, the skills that are missing or are hardest to find in the space. EFCC speakers 2023, EFCC speakers at the bar camp 2023, because there is of course a long process of they had to apply, they had to show their work is relevant, they were selected as speakers, they were speaking there, they have in the meantime have built on their work since then. So this is also a good signal. The course authors for TE fundamentals, I mean, they basically invented TE fundamentals, or the study season live track students who managed to acquire the NFTs. You, for example, everyone here in the call. And of course, the study season live track speakers, both with advanced knowledge in the sector. Okay, and let me just see what else I wanted to mention. Oh, yes, and I'd like to close with a remark on this third aspect, participation. Let me just, a final approach that came up is we could balance the likeliness to vote for particular groups in our community via a weight, meaning students who just earned their NFT in a fellowship live track might be way more motivated to take part in the voting than those who maybe participated with a talk in last year's bar camp and since then, I don't know, haven't been active in token engineering anymore. And I mean, we could establish weights to say, okay, let's give the study season students a lower weight because they might be motivated to vote anyways, and we can expect more voting participants of this type. And to balance this, to let's say, counterbalance motivation or missing motivation to vote, we could assign votes. But here, I think we are entering a dangerous area where we say, okay, we install an algorithm that is A, very intransparent, and B, it's fully based on our assumptions who is motivated to vote and who is not. And thirdly, this is about the freedom to vote, right? We should not try to impact the voting and the voting outcome just because we are afraid of limited participation. So, and this is an example of algocracy that I think is dangerous, and I just wanted to mention it. So, balanced participation where the vote not up to voters to participate or not. Good. Andrew, what do you think? Should we continue with the model now, looking at the time?
Yes, I think so. I have a lot of things I can say here to add on. I might make some videos async for people to watch because one thing I think is going to be crucial is if people don't think about this between now and next Wednesday, we have no hope of making a good decision. But we have a lot of tools and we can work together async to continue the discussion async and to come to next week's session well prepared and well informed. So that's one thing I would say.
So anyone, comments are still welcome. Drop it to the chat in the Discord and in the office hours tomorrow. And I'm already typing comments. Good. Octopus, please go ahead.
All right. So I am going to discuss the progress that we have made on simulations, and I also want to give some different frameworks here. Not to become too theoretical, but we want to have useful ideas. And so let's talk about what are our models here. Really, what I would say is we have two different types of models. We have our mental models, we have our simulation models. And one of the challenges in engineering is to translate between these two. Now, we have a mental model of something like fairness, but we don't know exactly what is fair. And we have to make decisions at some point about how we are going to measure different things. We can do this in a lot of different ways, and really they're all the same. They're all the same fundamentally under the hood. Like, how do we verify that things are behaving as we want? But in order to answer that question, we really first have to have a good sense of what do we want. And so what Angela has said just now is a excellent review. Very clear for me as your engineer. I now understand what you want. And now my job begins to help you and the other participants as decision maker get the information that will help you decide what best gives you what you want. Does that make sense? I don't want to erase this until I know that what I just said landed. Okay, now this is a very difficult thing. And what I've tried to do, and I would say I'm still trying to do, is to give you tools, give the students tools. I probably didn't emphasize this enough at the outset of like how I could help, but I've done a lot of work with verifying and designing attacks on new voting mechanisms. I've done it for quadratic voting with Gitcoin. I've done it with a lot of things that I can't talk about because they're under NDA, but I've done about 20 different crypto projects where my job was to go in, understand the mechanism, look for weaknesses in the mechanism, and see if the mechanism worked as intended. And some of those are public and some of those are not. But what I want to share with you now is my experience of those multiple projects with different clients, of different types of communication, different types of ways to give people the answers that are most helpful to them. And that starts with really understanding the questions that want to be asked. So a few weeks ago, we asked to brainstorm different ways what are some concrete specific questions that we might want to answer. And as a token engineer, that's something I absolutely have to have. Now, often the client doesn't start out with those types of concrete questions. They start out with these high-level questions of, how can I make money at this? How can I be sure the system doesn't fall apart? But in order to answer that question, I need to translate from these high-level questions that are often extremely abstract down to low-level questions that I can answer mechanistically. Not all token engineers have the same goal. I personally don't want to be in a situation where I think the client is believing what I'm saying just because I said it. I want to be in a situation where they actually understand and have taken ownership of the knowledge and expertise that I have to share. So this starts with the decision makers understanding what you want to know. What would make you feel comfortable in terms of making this decision? And this is something that everyone does every day. Like if you go to a restaurant and there are dishes that you've never seen before, and you're trying to decide between them, you might ask the server questions that will help you decide what you want to eat. The challenge we have is that when we enter this world of token engineering, we kind of mentally shift out of that everyday accessible knowledge. But if we can come up with concrete, specific questions this week, I have no doubt that the simulation tools we have can answer them. And the sooner we can come up with those concrete, specific questions, the sooner we can start progressing. So one task that I'm giving you, especially if you have volunteered for the responsibility of being a decision maker, is to be very clear about what you want to know. And Angela, as an experienced decision maker and designer, has given us a great model of what that looks like. And then you can use that as we review the slides, but be very clear about what you want to know. Are you with me?
Thumbs up. Yes, thank you.
Great. I really appreciate the feedback. One of the things that Zaremba just mentioned a bit was that we have a diversity of people in token engineering, a diversity of different types of minds. I identify as neurodiverse in a few different ways. And one of the things I want to push back against that no one has said, but that is an implicit assumption, is that there's like an intrinsic way to be down here in the technical side. There's no such thing as technical people and non-technical people. There's no such thing as math people and non-math people. There are people who have discovered the roads that work for them to figure out things, and there are people who are still figuring those things out. So that's one of the things I'm going to emphasize today is how can we build these things up? And we do want to build up because after we translate down to the low level of numbers and logic, we have to then interpret what we got so that ultimately we come back. And that's the purpose of a model. I believe it was Forrester, one of the greats of system engineering. And if it's not him, I hope someone will correct me, who said a model is built for a purpose. And that's why it's so important to spend this time thinking and ideating about what our questions are. There's a pretty common heuristic in software design, which says you spend 1/3 of your time designing, 1/6 coding, 1/4 testing pre-planned, and 1/4 testing kind of as things come up. And so this design phase is extremely important, and we don't want to just jump into coding without having done that. But since we have done that, if we can come up with these scenarios in this design, now we can begin to look at the questions by translating these attacks and these questions into specific scenarios. So I've looked at the high level of something we could ask about any of the mechanisms we're looking at. Is this mechanism vulnerable to Sybil attacks? And I can't answer that often in the abstract. I need to translate it personally to something that is concrete and likely wrong, but still potentially useful. So I'm going to translate this to, suppose there are 100 new wallets that obtain the TEE Fundamentals Module 1 NFT, and all of these people are A fans. They all just want to vote for candidate A. Will this change the results? And I can ask this about any mechanism that we're looking at. So I would design an experiment in Jupyter Notebook that allows me to answer this. Now, it certainly, as Joan has pointed out in the chat, it certainly depends on the number of votes. And this is not where I want to stop, because ultimately I can generalize this. And instead of saying 100, once I know how to do it for 100, I can rerun it where I can run it multiple times with any number of new wallets. And I can see how many new wallets would have to be. But I need something that is specific and concrete to help me get started and low level. And so this is going to be my starting point before I start building back up in generality. So I'm going to just have you shadow me as I walk through this process, and we go over some of the things we have done with led by Joan, Felix, and Jonas. And we're going to go over some of the tools we have and look at how we could use them to answer questions. So one thing that's pretty common in token engineering is to work through Jupyter notebooks. If you did the week 1 homework and you downloaded a VS Code or some type of equivalent editor, there's an extension that is built. There are actually several extensions that are built for working with Jupyter notebooks. And of course, it's not wanting to work with me on that. But in the past, whenever I've tried to do this, it's suggested to me that I that I install a Jupyter Notebook extension. And here's what I'm going to do. So I wouldn't say that this is a great notebook yet. I've created a notebook where I just look at one specific question, but I'm not in the process of answering this question. I'm also going to be getting familiar with the different mechanisms. So we have worked together to implement all of the mechanisms that have been proposed. We have the group hug mechanism designed by Joan. We have the rank and slide mechanism designed by Jonas, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. And then we have the single choice quadratic credibility voting that was designed by Felix. So these three mechanisms that we're trying to decide between are all here. If you go to the basic voting calculation repository and look for this, we would be happy to help you get this to your editor if you don't know how to do it already. And then you can have access to these mechanisms on your machine. And then let's look at what we can do with those. So a little bit before class started, a bit last week, I wanted to look at what we already have. And here I'm doing some basic imports. Now you may say, I don't know what this is doing. Guess what? I don't either. I copy pasted this from a different notebook and just put it here because it seemed to work. And it's working for me now. The other thing is, I was getting an error earlier where I didn't know how to address it. So I'm using Cursor, which is a variant of VS Code that has ChatGPT built in. But you can just copy paste from ChatGPT in a separate browser. Earlier, I ran into the issue. I'm having trouble importing packages because I'm not accessing the correct directory. And it told me how to get at it. So I copy pasted that in and then it started working. Now I do know what I'm doing a little bit here. So let me put some markdown in here. And one of the things you could do if you say, I'm not a coder, okay, can you do markdown? Markdown is very basic, it's familiar. And then you can create annotations to explain what's happening. So in the cell below, we are importing the available data as of May 28th, 2024, regarding which users have which NFTs. And if you want to, you can open this in a spreadsheet. What this looks like is, it looks a lot cleaner in a spreadsheet because this wallet addresses always look kind of nasty. But what this is, you can tell by the color coding. We have here the name of an NFT. In this case, it is NFT.
I think this is NFT-based reputation, the course, right?
Yes, and we coded it here as NFT rep v1. And then you can see the 0, which indicates that this wallet does not have this NFT. And that's the data that's available to us. Now we may need to extend this for hypothetical situations because not all of the information, was available on May 28th that will be available. And that's something we can talk about. If you tell me, hey, I'd like to add 100 people who registered for study season, it's not a hard thing to modify a data frame. In fact, I bet you could do it in here. I have a data frame. The columns are then I'm going to put 3 tick marks. I'm going to say I'd like to add a random value for a new column in each for each row, and call it studies registration. And then you can copy paste this and it will give you something that you can put in the notebook. That's one of the beautiful things about notebooks. I don't know if you watched the interview that I posted as a prerequisite for one of the previous weeks, where I was walking with one of my former students through what notebooks are really good for, but notebooks give you instant feedback on what's working and what's not. So here what we're doing is we're taking this voter information and we're converting it to a pandas data frame. And then I figured out the hard way, you have to drop one of the columns. And then I'm actually doing this to set index, where now when we look at it, we can use the head command. And now my index is by voter ID, rather than voter ID being a column. So I did that with the set index command. Guess what? You don't have to know that. You don't have to do that. You can copy paste these cells into your notebook, or you can take my notebook and edit it. And you know that this is what this does, and this is the information you have. Now I'm wanting to convert this to a dictionary, because when I designed the voting mechanism abstract type, it is supposed to take a dictionary with information about the voters. And for each voter, we have another dictionary. And this is why dictionaries are one of the fundamental things we cover in TE Fundamentals Module 4, because doing this type of information processing where you're working with nested dictionaries is one of the big things that happens. So if you want to, you could review that. If not, we'd be happy to discuss specifics of dictionaries. But here I have I've converted this from a data frame to a dictionary, and you can see what this looks like now. So this is the first voter. They have this wallet, and they have this vote, they have this NFT information with a 0 for the NFTs they do not hold, and a 1 for the NFTs that they do. And then it's just repeated that way for each voter. And I've called that something, I think. Oh, that was sample voters. Now, I did a little bit of processing here, which didn't change anything. You'll notice voters looks exactly like sample voters. It's a very minor technical thing that probably didn't even have to be done. I did it because I was trying to test whether or not this class I had made worked. So I'm going to skip past that. And then I'm seeing, what does the first voter look like? Okay. So this is the information that I already have that I'm going to be working with. If we want to generate different information for a what if scenario, no big deal. We can generate a new data frame. In fact, you could edit a new data frame in a spreadsheet and import it as a CSV, exactly the way we imported this CSV. Getting a CSV into this format is not the hard part. And again, we'd be happy to support you in doing it, and it won't be hard for us to do it to support you in asking your questions. So what we've covered so far is the information available and how to pre-process it for voting mechanisms. Are there any questions about that? And these need to be like specific technical questions, or maybe questions about what's possible.
Can I just have a slightly unconnected request? Could you change colors? I cannot look at the square. It's too contrasting.
What would you rather have it be?
I think it's quite about contrast, and I don't know if but he also has problems with colors. But when you
Which
put
one
like
is it?
bright red and bright other, is it possible to have it less bright?
Bright.
I mean, I can actually also make my screen dim. I don't
I'll
know which
throw
one to-
colors and you stop me when one works.
Gray maybe.
Okay. Does white work? Let's see.
Gray is better because it's less contrast, but white I suppose is also okay.
I don't think I have if I look at my Zoom options, unfortunately, I only have 15 colors. I have white,
I
red,
see.
yellow, green.
Okay,
Blue.
white.
Yeah.
White is good.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Thanks for changing the colors.
No problem. Any other questions? Are you on board more or less? So we've gotten the information we have, and we're going to use it now. So this is maybe where I should start commenting more. And many of y'all are excellent writers. So again, if you're not wanting to write code, what you can do is create a new cell that is Markdown, and you can explain what someone else is doing. So my question is, and I'm going to start off with just weighted plurality, which is not one of the mechanisms we're considering. My question is, for weighted plurality with this data set, how often does weight actually make a difference? And my process for answering that question I am going to set two different weighting methods, one of which will be equivalent to 1 person, 1 vote. The other will be equivalent to giving a weight of 1 for each NFT. And you may have heard of A/B testing. So lots of times you come up with two contrasting approaches and you run the same thing. And then I'm going to do trials where I randomly generate a choice for each voter and calculate who would win under each method. And then I would see how often they work. And so if you're not writing code, we could still do this, right? And someone who is better at writing code or who's more comfortable writing code can do this part. Now, I had to do a helper function here to calculate the voter weights from the specific NFT weights. And that probably isn't necessary in the mechanisms we're considering because they already have that built in, but I had to write it. And and again, this is out of order. This block of code gives a weight of 1 to each NFT, creates a dictionary. So let me do. Well, you can run it yourself and see what it looks like, right? That's kind of the point. But it just gives different weights here. It gives a weight of 1 to each NFT that we have in the current set. And I'm going to create voter weights of weight where each NFT gets 1. And so this is just counting how many NFTs each person has. And then I'm going to create a second weight dictionary called uniform weights, where each key has a weight of 1. And you can see that worked as well. that each voter here just has a weight of 1. And then here is where the code that we've written kicks in, because we have a single choice weighted plurality mechanism that was created a few weeks ago in this basic voting calc repo. I'm going to run this for 100,000 experiments. And then I actually asked ChatGPT for a little bit of help with this, of how to make sure that I ended up with the experiment number, the weighted winner, the weighted candidate scores. So this is who would be the winner if we weighted it. And this would be who would be the winner if we don't weight it. And then I put that in a data frame. It took about a minute to run 100,000 experiments, which, you can go get water or something. If you run it longer, it might take longer. And this is what the output looks like. So it tracks the experiment number and who the winner was under each process. And then that's my data generation process, which is taking the data I already have and generating new data based on the simulations. But you see, this isn't a ton of lines, and I can take this to my LLM and say, what do you think is happening here? And helps me understand. Now, this is not, I'm going to fuss at myself. I'm the only person in this class that I'll fuss at. This is not good code, because this should be commented better. This should be telling what's actually happening at each step, so that if, I get promoted to there is no better job than this one. But imagine I could get promoted to a better job, and suddenly I have to leave this for somebody else. I want to make it very easy for them to know what's happening. So let me make this be good code rather than teaching you all how to do bad code, or teaching you how to do something and saying don't do what I'm doing. Because how long does this take me? Like 30 seconds? It's like picking up trash after yourself. And the ideal is the ideal of this type of communication is, I think it was Uncle Bob, Robert Martin, who said code is read much more than it is written. And tomorrow you won't remember what this did. So please write comments for yourself and for your collaborators. So this took me, 45 seconds to add these comments in, and it'll save me so much heartache later. I put a to-do here. I didn't know how fast this would be because I don't like to use for loops. And usually if you don't use for loops, it's faster. But I think a minute for 100,000 is fast enough that we don't need to refactor at this stage. And Angela's completely right, I see in the chat. I want y'all to follow along, even if you're not typing right now. You can watch the video later and pause it and slow down. But are you on board with the big picture of what we're doing here in terms of shadowing me? This is not about my skill. This is about communicating the token engineering process to you.
Any thumbs up are welcome, or let us know if you're struggling. Okay, let's continue. I think it's okay.
So the final thing, after I have this data, this is the part that's a little bit hack, and it's not hacky, but it's so I'm calculating the proportion where the results were the same. What I'm doing here is I'm pulling the column I am pulling the column weighted winner from this. So this is like this corresponds to this column. Oh, that was beautiful how it lined up. This corresponds to this column where there's like D, A, C. And then in the second part, I am comparing it to the uniform winner column. And I'm asking, when are these two things exactly the same? That will produce a bunch of trues and falses. And if you have a bunch of trues and falses, you can average them to get the proportion. I accidentally just deleted the cell when I was trying to delete the. So let's see if I can get there. There you go. It didn't go anywhere. Could ask if I'm not sure what's happening here. I can ask, right? You can ask me, of course, or one of the other programming people. But you can also just be curious. I think it's amazing too how well this is understanding, because the LLM has no context for this except for what it sees in the code base. And it's actually doing a pretty good job of explaining, I think. Angela, would you be happy with this as an explanation?
I mean, I see the comparison now. However, can you repeat again the weighted plurality? We assigned weights randomly, or
Yeah.
how did we assign weights?
Yeah, the weight assignment in this case was just each NFT counted as one. So if you have 5 NFTs, you have a weight of 5. And that's compared to the uniform winner just ignored weights completely.
Right.
Basically one person would vote.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the once we have the data and the results, it's always the next question is what can we draw? What conclusions can we draw from it? Because this is only a number in the first place, and I would say this weight assignment seemed to be not enough to differentiate, because if we still have 0.67 equal, so proportion of experiments where the winner is the same, right? This doesn't seem, so the weights seem to not differentiate enough.
So maybe this tells us, I would say, that we need to fine-tune the weights. I'm curious if there's a number you'd be looking for more here. Like what proportion do you think? Just raw, because we're not seeing all the granularity, but
0.1.
Okay. So this, and notice what's happening here, students. Like, we did something and it didn't completely answer the question, but it drives us to the next question, right? And it helped us. Running the simulation was not the end-all be-all final answer, but now in communication with the client decision maker, now I have the basis to do something else and say, okay, maybe we want something that does way less than this. So now we can search for weightings where we get different results than one person, one vote, much more of the time. And is that something that you knew before we started this?
This is a question to the students, or this is a question to me?
To you, and then to them.
Yeah, I'm two things here. Yeah, these Q&A, so simulate, gain an insight, discuss, come up with the next question is definitely something that we can't replace with anything else. So you have to simulate to gain insights, but it's not just a one-time task, right? It's an iterative process. Second, of course, I'm hesitant in just throwing this number because we don't have any good insights to define this number. And then once you quantify, this can be dangerous because this is totally based on assumptions. Nevertheless, I think the direction is clear. The weights should differentiate. It should impact the voting outcome significantly. This is the let's say new element when it comes to finding the optimal voting design. The new information found here via this Q&A, what we just did.
Students, and learners, what do you think? Thank you, Angela, so much for answering my question. I do want to throw it out, and we can continue the coding aspect of this, but the goal is to understand the process. Because usually once you know what you want to know, and you have the right framework for it, writing the code is not the hard part. The hard, so what do y'all think? I'm open to what you've seen in this short demonstration, and then what can we do moving forward that will help us get more information?
Question to everybody here in the room. What are your thoughts here? Victor?
I'll give it a shot. So maybe, basically, Angela, what you said is, I understand where you're coming from, but at the same time also, I think if it deviates too much, then you might just giving a lot of weight to some people, and the reason why it doesn't show you why it might decrease from 0.67, what I see, to an assumption could be we want to have a threshold of lower than 0.1 or something. Then it might just be because the weighting is completely off, right? And then you have some people that have an immense weight, and that's really not what you want either. So I think that's a bit of a danger there. Just wanted to mention this, and I have no solution to this right now, but I think I would just kind of try to take the simple scenario, as I mentioned, I think already in the last call, as a base scenario, and then try to just see how much do the most experienced or the people with the most NFTs, how much distance, what is the delta, the minimum delta that we need to have kind of have something that is reasonably robust, but doesn't really shift it too much either. So I'm not sure if that makes sense. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I would rephrase it to, okay, the difference between weighted and unweighted voting is one element that we have to consider here. And the other one is, does the weight assignment make sense? Because as you say, if it's completely off, then yes, we have a difference, but it doesn't lead us to any good outcome.
Correct. And at this point, maybe Joan, I don't know if I know that she presented her model, and I think it's been already kind of a week or two, and I thought it would be great if we could just maybe have a few words from her, maybe to see how maybe her model could help there, because if I remember correctly, she was kind of grouping somehow into voting cluster or voting, I don't know, segments or something, and I'm not even really sure if I'm articulating this right, but maybe there's an idea there, or at least it would be great to somehow. Do you have this in mind, Octopus? Do you know what?
So that would be the next step.
Okay, perfect.
We have Joan's mechanism encoded, and thankfully Joan went through and checked that I had translated it correctly. I tried to translate all of the mechanisms into a common framework so that we could compare them and look at one syntax. Of course, if people want to use their, go ahead, Jonah. I'm talking over
No,
you.
I just wanted to point out to be clear that I looked through your code. I have not thoroughly tested it,
Mhm.
just to avoid misunderstandings.
Oh yeah.
But
Well,
it did look fine.
Mhm.
So I'm sure it is. I'm sure you have tested it a bit.
Well, that's why we went over unit testing weeks ago. Is I was hoping that we could come up with concrete test cases so that when we needed to do a translation like this, we could translate from test to test. And unit testing is something that doesn't require a high degree of coding competence to do. We can go over that and how people can help us be sure, because you're absolutely right, Joan. I'm not as sure as I would want to be that I've accurately translated the mechanics. So that's another thing we need help with from anyone who is willing to help. But let me see if I can get this to. We're going to do what Andre Cronje advocated for once and test in production. But the next step would be to take this and put this in as, okay, I'm going to pull this up to the top so it's available from the outset. Okay, I have it here. So I could, since this is a single choice mechanism, I could go ahead and throw a column on that calculates for the group hug who the group hug winner would be, based on the default group hug weights that were set. And group hug doesn't need weights per se, so let's say group hug winner. And this is why we wanted to get this into a common framework so that what are the arguments that should be here? I want everything default. And when I call group hug calculate, it just needs voters and voter choices, so that's good. So I don't need voter weights and uniform weights because it doesn't take the same thing. What I need is voters. And then sample choices. So remember we said you spend 1/4 of your time testing in a pre-planned way. That would be unit testing. Spend 1/4 of your time testing in an exploratory way. So we're testing exploratory right now, where we see, okay, I'm going to take 100% responsibility if this code does not work. Fingers crossed, everyone. That's not true. That shouldn't be possible.
You had a red squiggly line below the. You had written something GH for group hug, as if it didn't recognize it.
See, I'm going to clear all, restart, and run all. So you can see that it's checking off and we're getting new results. And then we can go to the error. Oh, I didn't define GH anywhere. Which is a better problem to have. So know how to fix that one. Okay, fingers crossed again. This will take about 1.5, 2 minutes, based on the fact that the previous one took about a minute. Now we have 3 mechanisms instead of 2. Probably a smart thing to do would be to not start off with 100,000 experiments, but to start off with 10. So let's stop this cell. Actually, let's start off with 1, because if we can run 1 experiment, that would be great. Okay, 1 experiment ran, and now we see that I did not track the winner from group hug when I added to my list. So I have a place to track. Now, what I worry about when I start hacking, I would not say I'm a great hacker. Like, I'm not super fast. I'm not. Lots of times I like to stop, design something, and then execute it, and then come back. I would say my feedback loop is probably slower than some other token engineers, which is totally okay. What I worry about when I start hacking is keeping track of what I did and making sure that I'm not just like spiraling. So here it works okay because I'm just doing like 1 cell at a time. There are people who can just like jump in and they just start hammering at it and it works great. I can't. It's not me. So I would like to stop at this point to be sure that I've captured what I've already done and understand what happened before I start doing a new setup. But here we have 10 experiments.
Let's summarize. We are on top of the hour anyways, and I think it's a good moment to go over what we have now.
Yeah. So what we have is 10 experiments where we looked at weighted winner with NFT weights equal to 1, where we have a uniform winner, and where we have the winner assuming that the implementation of group hug is correct. And so we now can compare them based on the differences and start looking at how often do they agree. Like, here's a place where group hug produced a different winner than either 1 person, 1 vote, or one NFT, 1 vote, essentially. And so now I'm going to rerun that bigger. And then I'm going to stop and record what I've done. And then I'm going to plan. Because what I tell my students at university is, why speculate when you can simulate? We can run these, we can talk about it all day, but if we talk about it and in that loop of talking about it, we're taking the time to drill down, get answers before our next questions. That's very valuable in my experience. And other people have their own excellent experience, but I have a lot of experience that I can share as well. So be sure that I make that clear to help you, to help out. My goal is to help using that experience. And this is the baseline of how you do anything. You figure out what you want to know, then you translate it into something concrete. You use the tools you have, and then you start to gradually build it up and communicate it. And the key is to not spiral. Like, it gets really exciting, but you want to stop and go in. You want to be on top of what you're doing and not let what you're doing be on top of you. Angela, I'm happy to hand off. I can upload this update to GitHub, and I think we can continue this async.
Yeah, I guess the call to action or homework is we share the link to this GitHub, and of course the recording again as usual, and then try it out yourself. So not only on a conceptual level, run simulations, get numbers, get results, and then don't forget to look at these results and what you can learn from it, what new insights you gained, and based on that, iterate on the question you'd like to explore. We'll meet again.
I'm actually wondering, oh, sorry, maybe you continue and then I'll ask my question.
Yeah, okay. I just want to mention, I have to now fast forward. Oh, wait. Just want to make sure I shared the office hour. Yeah, it's Friday, this Friday, 11 UTC. So a little bit earlier than today, 11 UTC Friday in 2 days. Let's meet again on Zoom for an office hour. Bring the simulations you have been running, bring new insights, or maybe also questions you want to explore but failed to explore, but because you haven't found any approach how to verify. So this is the task. And don't forget, be specific, formulate specific concrete scenarios, concrete questions you'd like to explore via the model. I think that's it from my side. Someone wanted to ask something. I don't know who it was.
Yeah, I was
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, like, with those, like the simulation that we just ran and the results, I don't know whether I would have any clue about how to, or what sort of insight even to get from that in some way. So yeah, but I can think about it a little bit more.
So I think it's likely that's because it didn't answer your question. Like, if you were curious, I was curious, does weight matter at all? If we weight the NFTs at all, is it going to make a difference? So I designed that to answer that specific question.
Okay.
And then
yeah,
it did a good job answering that.
My main question would be like, okay, what weights do we have to give for each NFT? But that's maybe not something that can even be answered in that way. That's more like just having to think outside of the code.
It definitely can, but let's continue this on Discord. I think.
Yeah, okay.
I also, if I could take one more minute, I realize we're out of time. This rank and slide notebook that you submitted, is it Jonas or Jonas? I'm very sorry, I don't know.
Both work.
Okay, Jonas. This gives the alternative perspective, which is you can understand a mechanism by working your way up. And I did this when I first started with quadratic voting to understand it. So here's the rank and slide mechanism. And you have these basic choices, and you're just showing, okay, this is what a good unit test would look like. And your code has very good unit tests, which mine currently does not. That you go through and you import a basic mechanism, and you go through and you see what happens if you calculate with rank and slide. So in this very specific, very concrete scenario where we only have like 3 users and they vote for people with these inputs. Now you see that the winner in this case would be candidate A. So now you can start playing with that. Doesn't have to be a high level pandas simulation. You can just pull up a mechanism and see. And this very specific, you can do a small experiment, right? Also great. The goal is for us to understand it together.
Does this provide some inspiration, Jonas? Hope so.
Yeah. I mean, I'll think about all that.
Yeah. And you can also go back to the slides where I raised my questions. I also approached it slightly different. For me, it was, okay, I start with the minimum, what's needed to outvote all other groups. So these are all valid approaches to start with simulations.
I'm going to start on your questions. And then
Yeah.
I hope others will be generating new questions that also help them.
Right. And I would love to continue the conversation on this. Victor, I also dropped the note to the chat. In it that I would be keen to discuss. So yeah, let's meet on Discord and let's meet on Friday in the office hour. And this way work our way through the voting design so that we can take a good decision next week. And I'm sure we will. Okay. Thanks for today and see you on Discord. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
joining and not giving up.
Thanks so much. Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
The recording has stopped.